Can we just walk through the process of what it takes to apply for one of these grants?
I'd be happy to.
And since we've recently relaunched the application itself, can you share with us a little bit about what that process looks like? And I can share because I know it's on our website as you're speaking, but can you walk us through that?
Yeah, just to start off, we have now a digitized application form. Before this, it was just kind of an email with a big attachment. What we want to do is be able to capture certain key elements of the application, location and numbers of people affected, and the dollar amounts or the local currency amounts, and quantitative aspects of the application, which we can use and track as we develop the process and develop our grant making process, and as we communicate to our funders, which are largely uh, grantors outside, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but we have many individual contributors that like to know who, where, and what. So it is a digitized process to help us communicate with them. The application itself is divided up into really three parts. The contact details, like you'd expect on any application that you all fill out in your lives, and then a description of the project itself, project description, followed by a project details, followed by the economics or the budget to the project to it. So those are the sort of 3 or 4 parts of the application itself. The very top of the application is I don't know if it's there, but it certainly is there on the website. It's not at the top of this. Is the yes, there it is in blue, is our mission. And all those that are filling out this application need to be mindful that that's really what the driver is here. So the more that the application can do in all its pieces to illuminate that, to highlight that, to emphasize that, it'll come through much more loud and clearly to those who are reviewing it. So with that, I've already explained some of the pieces, the first part there. The contact details are basically the names and places where the project is going to take place. Further down in details is some declarations we expect grantees to make, promising that they are a club in good standing. For example, they will agree to, at the end of the day, fill out a memorandum of understanding that includes having a separate bank account for the project itself.
Can you just share, Charlie, why is that important that we have these memorandums of understanding with the partner clubs?
Yes, memory is a funny thing, and when we get into the project, sometimes we forget that we've made promises, commitments to do certain things. Perhaps they're post-action. In other words, they will do things after the project is finished. It's easy to forget those kinds of commitments that have been made going into this. The idea that who's going to put money into the account first? We do expect that the host club will put its commitment into its bank account first, and then we will follow with our commitment immediately thereafter. So it's really just to make sure we have an operating document that we can always go to when we're executing the project itself and following the project. But I should also quickly point out that all the projects need to have a post-action report following the project itself, and that should be submitted within 60 days of its completion. So that's another thing that's expressly outlined in the MOU.
So what's the typical duration then of a project, since that, with that requirement being known?
Well, the typical duration of a project, we have funded uh, projects that last as short as 10 days, all the way up to, I think we've got even one that's going to be moving along for about 3 years.
Wow.
So obviously, the longer the project, the more the need for an MOU that we can always go back to and relate to what we agreed to. And as you all know, we all people change roles, and the person that started the project isn't the same person that finishes it, and so that's the kind of thing that needs to be well documented. The projects need to be well documented through the MOU.
Excellent. And then is there, in terms of the typical application process, how long does that take after a club will go on this website and fill out an application?
Well, so we have a quarterly cycle we're trying to adhere to. The quarters aren't the calendar quarters. They are January 31st, April 30th, July 31st, and October 31st. And these are the dates in which we formally will look at new applications. And I mean by formally look at, the application needs to be to us by that date. Depending on how thorough and complete and thoughtful it is, it will depend on how quickly we can get to it, to review it. If it's very much all those, we might get to it as soon as a week or two. By we, I mean, we have a committee of volunteers at MPI who have agreed to serve on the committee, the reviewing committee, small grant. We call ourselves a small grant committee, which I chair. And we normally, I'd say 50% of the grants will need some work after they are received by the representative. So that might take as long as a month.
Okay.
And then, in which case, we will meet again at the end of that month, and hopefully process the application through committee. And once it's through committee, we recommend approval at our board meeting, which is held monthly at the beginning or near the beginning of each month. So the typical period of waiting and review would be a month to 2 months.
Excellent. And then as I look at this application, I see there's required questions about folks benefiting directly and indirectly. And if ever, as a Rotary Club is preparing their application, how do they go about actually identifying what numbers are there and confirming if those are indeed the correct numbers to be putting down?
Yeah, so I mean, it can vary. Let's look at the direct beneficiary for a second. If it's a bed net project, and that's the one that's presented to us, obviously you need to look at the number of people that you expect to be sleeping under bed nets, and that's a pretty easy number, I would guess, to determine. If it's a publicity campaign, you need to think about how the reach of the radio station. How many can you get data on how many would be expected during the time that the promotions that would be aired, that would be listening. If there's a huge billboard, how many people would drive by it? Those are the indirect beneficiaries. If it can be a combination. It could be a test, and it could be a village health team training exercise. And so the project is all about the training. Then obviously the direct beneficiaries are the trainees themselves, but then indirectly they're going to be reaching out into the communities and connecting with populations of people. And a best estimate of the number of people from an indirect standpoint that those people would touch would be a number that would go into the indirect category.
Those are great examples, Charlie. And in terms of outputs, like the overall outcomes to be sustained over time, how does the committee receive those answers from Rotary clubs? What are you looking for when you see the question on that long-term sustainability?
Yeah, well, sustainability to us, and certainly to me, means what impact will the project have on its intended population following its conclusion. I'll have to say, in the beginning, I remember I was involved with a project which was just a treatment program, and it wasn't very sustainable, although it did connect a lot of, it did impact a lot of lives. Conversely, if a program is about teaching people best practices, that kind of educational preventative approach can have a much more sustainable impact over a longer period of time. And so that's kind of what needs to be addressed here. What impact will this project have once it concludes in the population to which it's directed?
Excellent. And I guess I just have one regarding the application. It'd be good to have some insight on, from your opinion, on the funding and the budget section for applicants. Like, what requirements are we really looking for in the budget?
That's a good question, Ariel. Truth be told, when I first receive an application, perhaps before I even read the first line, is I look for its budget. The budget communicates a lot. It communicates to me how much thoroughness the applicant has leaned into it. How much is there supporting documents that support some of the line items, especially on the more significant costs involved, if it involves treatments, if it involves tests, test kits, certainly if it involves bed nets. It does help to have some evidence that of what the source of the cost is. And so the more of that, the better. And it is basically our roadmap to how we're going to allocate a scarce resource, in this case, money. And so how that is done is very important to us and gets a good look. In addition to that, and is not only how it's going to be expended, how the money is going to be used, but we would like to know the sources of funds. This is also put into the same section, and the reason why it's put in twice is because we can extract the digital data from the application itself, but we also would like to see it in a spreadsheet form as a separate attachment. So we see here, as you put up, both the uses, the expenses, and the sources of funds that needs to be explicit.
Oh, this is very helpful, Charlie. And I clicked on that link which is embedded within the application, just to show folks that there is a sample as well to look for. That link right here for how to submit.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I realize that that's kind of an abbreviated form that you have there. We, in most cases, in most projects, look for a significant amount of detail in the expense side of the presentation.
And then any other, it says here, other documentation that would be useful for, what kind of examples did you have of what clubs have submitted in the past that have been, additional documentation that's been helpful for the committee in deciding the fate of a grant application?
Well, there are a lot of things. This is kind of an important catch-all. One of the things, I don't know if you, Ariel, plan to discuss this, but one of the things it's important, in addition to obviously the economics of the project, is the need. And the need sometimes can't just be expressed in terms of, well, we need 1,000 bed nets, or we need 500 test kits. It needs to be expressed in terms of, what is malaria doing to this place? What is malaria? What is the prevalence rate? Is the problem that the hospital or the medical facility receiving too many visits? Is it mortality? And the focus is almost always in these grants on infants, in other words, under 5-year-olds and pregnant women. Those, as most people in the endemic world know, are the most seriously impacted by malaria. So anything that documents existing conditions, statistically, data quantifiably in those regards, is important to add here. In addition to that, documents that show photos of where and who is important, and any in short videos, the space doesn't allow for long videos. A place to put sources, costing sources for your line items, important line items in your expense budget is another place you can insert them.
Excellent. And then a few final questions for you. If a grant is approved, what happens immediately after the approval for the Rotary Club?
Well, some people think that, Ariel, that you're 99% done once you got approval. We've discovered that the hurdles in the money transfer portion of this can be difficult. In the MOU, we have an exhibit which is, we think we've got everything covered from a money transfer standpoint. It usually is missing something, so people have to be patient about that. We have to make sure that the monies from the host club are put into the account. The account has to be established first, and the like. So it can be done quickly, but sometimes it can take as long as 2 or 3 weeks to sort through that process.
And then once the grants get underway, what's the expectation of, you mentioned reporting at the very end, is there expectation of any mid project reporting?
There's never, we never can receive too many photos of projects. There are certain photos that mean more to us than others. I should point out photos that include action as opposed to team pictures. Team pictures are fine, but we also like to see people doing the work. Even better when we see Rotarians doing the work. Remember, and I can't emphasize this enough. The mission is to ignite a fire under Rotary to eliminate malaria. So any photos, short videos that can do that are precious to us, and we would love to have them.
And then a note on rejected applications. For those who are not successful, are those applicants, do they receive feedback, and are they encouraged to apply again?
It's always difficult to turn down an application. As a matter of course, we'll look at as a matter of process, really, when an application arrives, I will give it kind of what I call the smell test. Does it just kind of measure up before I assign one of our volunteers to go deeper into it. I won't do a lot of active diligence on it. I will just kind of look at it, and I might get back to somebody and say it needs beefier information in these areas, and it won't be assigned. So it'll just hang in the winds until we receive that information. We don't have a formal process for rejecting them as yet, but this is a competitive process, and we are beginning to receive more applications than we can fund. And to the extent that happens, we will probably be ending up formalizing more of a rejection process, regret process as we roll along. And you'd mentioned, Ariel, reporting. We don't have, the MOU will cover what the needed reports at the moment. And we are building, the next phase of our growth cycle is to put in place some digitized templates that grantees can use for both interim reportings as necessary and certainly post-action reports.
The program has definitely evolved and is going to continue to evolve. Did you have anything final you wanted to share about the program?
No, the small grants program, I think you can almost scroll right down to the bottom of it, Ariel. It's got frequently asked questions and answers. So please feel free to go to that if I missed anything or you need amplification on anything that I've submitted here. And it's got a contact address that you can reach out to us if you've got questions. Realize that we're a volunteer organization and we're trying to do the best we can, always trying to do the best we can. We're evolving as an entity. I stressed earlier the idea that statistics that show need in a community are important, in which we can measure the success of the project against. In some ways, there's no failures in this world. If properly documented, all projects don't always end up in the success column. But if we know why they're not successful, that's is equally as informative to us, and we can better our process as we go along and make for better small granting.
Absolutely.
So I can't overemphasize that again, but we can't kind of embark down that road unless we have good data about the community and its needs in terms of malaria prevalence or hospital visits or mortality and the like up front, so we can measure how the project performs against those dashboards.
And as you had mentioned earlier on this page here, our small grants page, we have a reel at the bottom from our blog for those applicants that are interested in looking at other projects that have been funded and seeing what updates are there. We frequently will include them in our monthly newsletter as well as on our blog on the website. So I would encourage applicants as well to look at some of those past successful projects to get an idea of some of the funding available and what are the various options out there.
Exactly.
Excellent. And then I like to notice that this is on our front page of our website, that we have actually shared how much we funded to date and what countries we've awarded small grants to. So on this last note, Charlie, what do you envision the future of this program to be?
Well, our future will depend to some extent or large extent on continuing investment by our funding partners, which, as I said, includes not only the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but also a number of individuals, mostly Rotarians, who have also contributed to the ability of us to make small grants. And you, the grantees, in giving us thorough and thoughtful, as we've described, applications that can have distinct measures of success that we can communicate back to our partners and find new partners because they're well documented. So we're all part of the process of success. And the more of all that, the more grants that we will be able to make. As you alluded to in the very beginning of this, it's sort of been a two-step process as far as small grants. We had kind of an informal process until about 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't know the exact number of grants that we made, but I'm guessing they were probably on the order of 10 to 15. And since we've formalized the process, there's about, I think there's about 20 grants that we've either have finished or about to be in the approval process, or are underway, or we've completed.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Charlie, for your time today. Hopefully this video is really informative for potential applicants and those who just want to learn more about our program.
Thanks, Sarah. It's been my pleasure.